Hi, and welcome to a special edition of GFW Radio. You're getting two this week, if everything goes well. This is Jeff Green, the editor-in-chief of Games for Windows magazine, and we are here with a very special guest today. We have Cevat Yerli, the CEO of Crytek, here to talk to us about his upcoming game. What the heck is it called? I know what it's called. It's Crysis.
Yes.
So hi.
Hi there.
Also on board are Darren Gladstone, Sean Elliott, and Sean Malloy. So how long have you been over here in the U.S.?
Actually, I just arrived yesterday morning. And some people, there's a myth that I was here for the last 2 weeks because I showed up 2 weeks ago. But no, I was in the office cranking on the bugs, making sure that Crysis ships. And yeah, so I just flew in yesterday morning.
And we'll try not to ask too hard questions if you're tired.
No, I'm still in a jet lag. I'm about to go to bed now.
You're not going to go back to your room and play Halo 3?
No, unfortunately not. Or maybe fortunately not. I don't know.
Oh. So right before we turned on the machine here, I was informed that it was a little bit deliberate that the Crysis beta started at about the same time as the Halo 3 launch?
Yes, because it wasn't deliberate per se in terms of to confront, but the date was picked deliberately because we said we have to make sure that Crysis gets its beta time. And it coincided that it was same time with Halo 3, but we said we should not move out because of Halo 3. Mm-hmm. So deliberate decision was not to move out because of Halo 3, but we didn't care for any other releases because it's not PC platform. Mm-hmm. And so the gamer profiles are different, and I guess we should talk about that maybe a little bit.
So you weren't scared of Halo 3 then?
No, we weren't, because it's 360. It's a game which people wait for 360, and Crysis is a game for PC, clearly. Mm-hmm. So.
And it clearly has enough of its own hype, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're happy with the amount of hype we have, so we don't need more hype built through Halo 3. Uh-huh.
I guess we could just kill this podcast, and if it doesn't need more hype.
I'm not here to build hype. I guess I'm here to entertain you three.
That's right. We invited you. That's right.
Part of the difference that you're saying, I mean, clearly they're different audiences. There's going to be some overlap in the same way that all of us here will eventually play Halo 3. Some of us have already been playing it as of last night. But I wanted to know a little bit more about who you specifically see as, outside of the vagaries of everybody as being your potential audience, but who do you really see as your audience? And to tie that into two other questions that I see or comments that are most frequently made about the game. Some of them we talked about before. One is that... So, for example, someone's on a message board and they post a screen. Here's a new video of Crysis. Here's a new screenshot. Everyone goes, oh, my God, that looks great. Then the next comments, and they're always in the next post, you can guarantee it, is too bad my computer won't run that. And then too bad it just looks good and there's no game there. So you can hit those in either order, but I think the too bad my computer won't run that ties in pretty clearly with the notion of audience and who the game is for.
Yeah, it's like when I see the new Lamborghini picture recently and by the the IAA, I said, too bad I don't have the money to buy the car. It looks great, Mm-hmm. So the point here is Crysis is a hardcore game, targeted primarily for hardcore. But of course it scales back, so if you don't have the money or the pockets effectively to have the equipment to play Crysis as it should be played, you can of course have it with your 2 to 3 years or 2 to 4 years old hardware constellation effectively. But more important is it's what I use the term lead gamer. Lead gamer is effectively somebody who has the top-end hardware, has all the best games, but talks to his friends, gamers, and leads them effectively. Mm-hmm. And so Crysis is a game for lead gamer, hardcore gamer, enthusiast at the high-end market, but at the same time fulfills the people who don't have the deep pockets.
Mm-hmm. For the people that don't have the deep pockets and are playing, is there enough to the game to sort of sustain itself and to justify itself as being something to pay attention to if you're not having the visual veneer applied to it?
Yes, because the bar is it's very simple. And 2 to 3 years ago, like when I look at Crysis and let's say Far Cry, right? I compare them because we develop both of them. So if you play Crysis min spec effectively, it will look somewhere between high to very high in Far Cry. So if you were happy with Far Cry, you'll be happy with Crysis, but at the same PC. But to play Crysis at high and very high, you have to buy a new PC. It's a generational jump. I mean, Crysis was one generation, Far Cry. Crysis is the next generation, you know? So that needs a new generation of PC. At the same time, it scales even further now. So from that angle, yes, you will be able to play single player. There's effectively no gameplay difference. Frame rates might vary, visuals might vary, but the immersion factor coming through the visuals, coming through the amount of simulations around you, that will only be really present on the high-end configurations. And but from the gameplay, from the action itself, it won't differ. So it will be the same. And multiplayer is a bit different story. So we went extra miles. Like we could have made just a one version multiplayer, right, in Power Struggle, and say, okay, we have one multiplayer version that scales, has different configurations. But we went the extra step to make sure Power Struggle, in this case, receives a DX10 version. But the DX10 version is not related to DX10 per se. We took only the opportunity of moment, if you want, and said, hey, with the introduction of 8800 and the DX10 notion, we could use it and cut off the min specs to introduce next generation of online gaming, you know, as a minimum hardware base. Because anybody who has an 8800 or plus in the future, he can play with time of day now, with physics, with breakables, in a multiplayer game that feels like a single-player experience. And so we took that as an opportunity. And at the same time, we have the DX9 multiplayer for the people of now or the past. Because when I develop a game, I always think of how can we make sure that this is a game for the past, for the present, and for the future? How can we scale the 5 years, essentially? 3 years in the past and 2 years in the future. That's kind of the bandwidth. Because if I have a favorite game, I want to play it like for the 5 years, you know, ideally. So when I play my favorite game today, it's gonna look the same again. But Crysis in 2 years will look different. It will look better than today.
So do you expect it to be, you know, selling strongly 2 years from now, and then 5 years from now?
Well, if Crysis becomes classic in people's mind, gamers' mind, there will be a good reason why you can buy Crysis still in 2 years, and it's going to be still state of the art, because it will adapt and configure itself to the high-end configurations. So you will get so by the time in 2 years, if a game doesn't appear with similar gameplay that competes in gameplay and on the adapted visuals, so it's going to be still state-of-the-art gameplay and state-of-the-art visuals. Usually a classic game does become outdated by visuals, but remains classic by gameplay. So Crysis hopefully will remain classic by gameplay and will adapt to be trendy in visuals all the time. That's the philosophy behind it.
Well, I remember back when after you released Far Cry, I forget exactly how long after, but you updated that to a 64-bit version.
Yes.
So I mean, so theoretically, you could just continue following up with Crysis and add on to that later.
Yeah, I mean, we have it built in now. That's a good thing. Is in Crysis we learned from Far Cry, and people appreciated it. So we said we could build a part of this already in, but we still have to, because we don't know the profiles of future hardware. We know only about 6 or 9 months out. So we have prototypes of new hardware, but we don't know what will NVIDIA or RTI or AMD or Intel will come up in the next 2 years. You know, I mean, they won't tell us at this stage still. But as soon as we know any information, we will auto-patch Crysis with some profile hints. And as soon as you buy it, the game will start configuring to that configuration. So it will be much thinner patches. And we may do content upgrades in addition, like higher res textures, like quadruple textures, for example. We may do it in a half year, 1 year, but we will try to maintain we will try to update surely the shaders, the content. We will hopefully do it, but minimum the profile. So I guarantee you, in 2 years from now, you can ask me that 2 years again. You should. In 2 years from now, you will have a Crysis that is completely different in visual quality than today. It will look just better, and it will be our goal and strive will be to make sure Crysis is always leading in the experience, and release it now, but keep it there, keep it up there, essentially.
In your analogy, you know, you were basically positioning Crysis as the blonde bombshell who also has a PhD, and granted that
and
the visuals, and granted that you know the way that the game looks is not entirely separate from the way that the game plays. The two are interrelated. But putting that aside for a moment, what specifically is the nature of the PhD of Crysis, the blonde bombshell?
Well, it's intelligence, the artificial intelligence, which makes her, or Crysis an attractive, intelligent. The artificial technology we spend in to refine just even the one-on-one combat. Like, you against one AI feels substantially more intelligent and tuned through the AI quality and level design, in fact, that I feel that our game feels more intelligent, more requires you to think more. So it needs more challenging in terms of outsmarting the experience. So that alone is one aspect. Second aspect is all the AI technology we added for example, for the aliens, for the whole driver AI, for the pilot AI, for the squad AI. Not like that we have whole squad tactics, but they stay not in your way at least. So this is actually an achievement in games today. If you look at AI technology, and the other things like assessing the environments, the way they assess, the way the sensors work. In Far Cry we had just vision, but in Crysis we have peripheral vision and vision. You know, like we have this vision and this vision effectively. Mm-hmm. Like a view raster of 90 degree and 180 degree simulations that tunes the stealth gameplay. So, and now they have also in the context of, are you very visible or not? Like they evaluate the visibility more. And they can differentiate between what they hear, how loud they hear.
I remember one of the original criticisms we had back in Far Cry 1 was that the AI almost seemed too aware of your presence, especially right at first. Yeah. Where you would pop around a corner and a guy from real far away.
That won't happen anymore. So that's exactly this kind of things we nailed down as well. Mm-hmm. We were criticized for the difficulty of Far Cry. We were criticized for AI that can see same quality in near you or distance. So now the peripheral vision and the vision changed by distance and by the context. Mm-hmm. You know, so the vision sensors are tuned and next generation now through that, and that refines the core gameplay. Now, for example, if you run behind a bush, he was still shooting it, but in Far Cry there was a moment, for example, if the bush was closer to me, and I run into behind the bush, the AI would spray fire because he would see I'm running behind the bush to take cover, but he's not stupid. He sees, hey, you just run in, so he's going to shoot into the bush, right? Mm-hmm. But where the system failed was that it didn't check this is when the player ran into behind the bush, but the bush was closer to the AI. What means that the bush was just in the path of the AI and the player, but the player didn't deliberately run into the bush. The AI just thought, hey, he's running behind a bush. That felt like cheating because the bush was like AI was 2 meters, it was a bush, and 50 meters the player was. And so this looked like cheating because he didn't understand the bush actually is not for me, but for in front of him. I don't know if it makes sense.
No, it does. Point of view.
Why do you think that that now for games like yours, that like just listening to you talk about the AI, it seems like it must be so hard for you guys to do and to think of all those situations and to get to the enemies to think and react in that way. And if you think back to older FPSs, I mean, you know, the Dooms and Quakes or whatever, I mean, these were monsters that just ran straight at you with no intelligence, and we all lived with that. So why do you think it's different now?
The difference is very simple, because we don't have corridors, we don't have strict scenarios where we exactly know what the player will do. In fact, we don't want. Not that we don't. It's not a bad thing that we don't have it. In fact, we deliberately decided not to have it. The whole point about our game is that I want the player to think before he does anything. And that's the core gameplay difference in Far Cry introduced. And I think it's a concept which we, as our first game, we kind of did it. But it was like an apprenticeship work still. And we perfectioned this in this Crysis now. We said, this is something, like we said, we have something here cool. And this coolness now, outsmarting gameplay, we have to refine at the core of Crysis. And so we took all the know-how and critique from Far Cry and really focused on the one-on-one combat itself to nail that. Once we had that in mind, like once that we had in place, we then said, okay, let's work on the group tactics. Like, make the group really be intelligent and smart. Now they have to react on different distances, different audio profiles, how loud you are, visibility profiles, your suit modes, the environment, which context you are. So the complexity of the AI, what to recognize and to analyze, is way bigger than ever in Far Cry. And that is to accommodate the PhD degree of the player, or the blonde PhD degree thing you were talking before, Sean. The fact that the Crysis has a nanosuit, the configurable weapon system, the open environments, effectively, the different time settings, everything together, that needs an encounter that actually can encounter intelligently. And then we invested a lot about the pathfinding system in Crysis, which actually the AI has to, once he knows what to do, he has to go to a position. Now in Far Cry, the world was static. In Crysis, the world is completely dynamic. Now again, it needs much more AI technology behind it to make the player AI position intelligently in a world that is dynamic. A complete different challenge is obstacle avoidance, dynamic path navigation networks, like things which...
It's one reason why with Fear, which is, among critics is regarded as having excellent AI, but in that game, all the environments and the context in which that AI can act out, its various options are pretty constrained.
Yes, completely.
They're designed very specifically to foster and encourage specific
and
behaviors.
They did a great job for that.
Yeah, but I mean, and you're talking about environments where rather than... a series of rooms interconnected by 3 hallways, and you have a very finite set of entry points and exit points for your AI actors. You have a field with rocks, trees, shacks, and all these other things.
We have a sandbox. And we have a sandbox where the player can come from anywhere. He can use anything he has. He can use an nanosuit mode, and he can be playing as a long range, as an action guy, as a tactical, as stealth. Like all different playstyles are fully featured. Where you would need normally 4 games to play with. This is like all gameplay styles in one, and encountered by an AI that can actually assess both and give you a good experience by that.
So do you worry at all that the players are going to be able to, because it's so open and there's so many ways to do it, and the AI has so much work to do, that they'll be able to find some seams or some cracks where they can slip through and fool the game? Or are you confident at this point that you...
I'm confident we found all these things, but I won't bet my whole life on it.
Right.
But I hope it won't happen. But the thing is, the fact is that the AI is still intelligent enough. So if the player finds, let's say, somewhere a polygonal edge where he can shoot through, the AI will try to still flush him out and things like this. So
Right.
there's some exception handling we implemented. But principally, our goal was to make sure that the AI reacts on being shot at as a number one rule. That means, so if you shoot at him, no matter where you are, the AI is going to shoot back to you somehow, So there will be a worst case scenario still will be handled with combat.
And if they can't shoot you, they will find a way to move closer to you.
Yes, or throw grenades at you. So there will be ways how they will attack you. But principally, again, the sum of technology we added, and I want to, because I'm getting off track of the PhD thing, because there's much more about what Crysis makes intelligent. The AI technology is one thing, but the level design itself. The level design, the systems in terms of the nanosuit and the customized weapon system, the whole thing that the entire gameplay asks you as a gamer to think about it. And so I say it this way, if a girl which I meet is brainless, she wouldn't ask me questions, right? She wouldn't make me think. So I would just think she's hot. But that hot girl, which has PhD degree, is actually getting more interest of me because she's also asking the interesting questions that might be a bit more substance in the relationship, So Crysis will have a better relation to the gamer, for sure.
In the spectrum of storytelling in FPSs, that will include, Halo at one position on it, Half-Life series, and then maybe some of the original Doom games, where that would be on the very, extreme of a spectrum where it's basically just action. Where do you see both, Crytek as a studio's position on it and specifically the game Crysis? I mean, where does it fall in there? And so to define this better, so say, for example, in Halo, you have an emphasis on cutscenes, where you'll have action that's very similar to what you're describing, where it's about the tactics, it's about the feedback of the combat and stuff, but maybe with a lesser emphasis on the sense of immersion and the realness of the environment or something like that. And then with Half-Life or something, or even BioShock, where you're never interrupting the game. to show you a movie that's not a part of a game, technically speaking. You know.
Okay.
So you know where in that. You know, where in that spectrum is your game? Because we talk about the action all the time, but we do talk about the story insofar as we know aliens come, Koreans are here, Americans are there, and we all end up fighting. But what about?
I think the one thing you have to understand is, I think what you should do is, because the story is something. I mean, we always are encountered with technology questions and with game, like with AI questions. And I see some of the other game interviews where they only talk about story and only talk about visuals, depending on the strength of the studio. It seems to be. I actually was saying to Andrew, why they don't talk about the story or characters, etc. But they say, well, you know, you're looked at as like the studio. I said, well, we need to change that, you know. So, principally, the way we emphasize story a lot in terms of making sure we tell a good story. But at the same time, I want to say that we're not a story that requires a PhD degree to understand either. Like, speaking of PhD degrees again, that means that it's very easy to follow, has characters, the typical character setup, but also it's important that we don't tell a story through cutscenes, through cutscenes which are out of your view. Or through radio messages, or through tapes you find, or speakers, or like in a way that it's through VO, effectively. But what we do is we show the story around you.
It consists entirely of verbs, right? I mean, insofar as you have a story there, it's the action. It's happier.
It's a plot that happens, but the plot is directly correlated to all the objectives and the action the player does. And everything you do has a meaningful development for the characters or for you as a gamer, and you bring the story forward. But usually what happens is some games, there's a world already which is in a state, a fixed state, and has effectively a backstory only. And what happens is that you find out through nuggets of information what happened there to get to the state. In Crysis, the world alone, the environment is a framework, and the island itself is a framework, a character that evolves effectively to tell a story, but not through dialogues that is spoken to you, but rather through the visual transformation of the world. You know, the world evolves around you as you go through the actions which are correlated to your objectives, and the objectives are correlated to the overarching story. So I feel that all the core gameplay we talked about, the Sandbox experience, are always converge into the moments where something happens around you in the world, but through visuals and through animations. That means, shit, the world is changing. You know, something's happening here again. So that's how we tell the stories, through the ambient storytelling. Number one, as a method, ambience by being the visual ambience, the world. The second way, the means for us in terms of story, is developing a plot rather a backstory. So very important is there's a situation in the world, but the situation and your original mission changes completely. Everything develops and everything transforms. And last but not least, I would say that story, in terms of cutscenes, we have cutscenes in the game, but they're always in the point of view of the player. So whilst we interrupt the gameplay action, we don't take it away the player view.
Is that a tradition? Are you talking more about, like, you know, say, for example, there are moments in BioShock or Half-Life or something where they will constrain player movement?
Yeah, so constrained,
know, so that you're still able to look around, but it's keeping you in a place so that people are able to, like, make their marks and act in a way. And then a cutscene, sometimes you'll get a letterboxing effect and it will play through.
No, it's actually a hybrid of that. It's first-person view, but it's letterboxed, because we want to tell you something there, and we want you to listen to it. And if you don't listen, it's okay, because there's still ambient information enough to tell you what's going on anyway. But we wanted to keep the story in give some chunks delivered to you to converge the Sandbox experience and to bring the story forward effectively through points of storytelling methods, but through crafted and choreographed cutscenes. But they're always from the first-person view. That's, for me, important. So you will never see yourself in third person, effectively.
Clearly, I mean, I got the hint when I visited you guys in Frankfurt before that Crysis, I mean, you had big plans for it. That you already talked about, I mean, you more or less were talking about the notion that Okay, let's back it up because here's something that changed. This was an important change. Originally, you had the alien ship crash lands in the South Chinese Sea.
Yes.
Creates this tsunami and all this stuff. And now, when I last spoke with you, the notion is instead more like War of the Worlds, where these things is where I'm getting at. But this thing in the first Crysis game is already there, buried in the earth. And then then it's exposed, by some sort of activity. It activates or something.
Yeah.
But so before you were saying, an armada of these things are coming toward Earth, and now I would assume the equation would just change to, again, like War of the Worlds, there's an armada of them already buried throughout the planet.
The thing is, we don't know. And even in the end of the game, you don't know. What you know is that effectively, well, this would be a spoiler what I'm talking now about, but I will not try to spoil it. So the way I see this is, Crysis is encapsulated in terms of what happened there. So it tells a story what happened, okay, about some of the backstory, but also develops the plot so that what happened is like in a time frame of, I would say, 1.5 hour into the game. Then about 1.5 hour later, you start actually moving things forward to the point to find out what happened and what's happening now till to the end of the game. But the question whether there are more of them completely is unanswered, in fact. And I would say that might be likely.
Right. Here's another approach to it.
Too.
Put it this way, Cevat. EA would be very well served to have a premier first-person shooter franchise.
Yeah, sure.
Clearly, it's got to, just from a business perspective, you look, Activision's got Call of Duty, which is doing very well. Halo. There are various other no-brainers, and that's one category that, in my mind at least, and this is subjective, other people might disagree, you might disagree, but they do not, at the time, EA does not have a first-person shooter that's premier, in the sense that it is, like, people look to it in the way you would Call of Duty, in the way you would Halo, with the exception of Crysis. So if it's successful to the point where you're in a partnership with them now, but it's not direct. I mean, they don't own the studio or anything. Would you? And you've already been in a situation where you've lost control of a creation, Far Cry. Would you?
No,
if
we
the game's
didn't
super
lose.
successful, will you give the whole thing over to EA, or you just assume? I assume you'd continue to work with them on it, but I mean, just thinking that far ahead, I mean, it's got to be in your studio's mind right now, because you're on the verge right now of finding out if your game is going to be a success to that degree or it's not.
No, that's it's completely different topics. The way I want to explain it, first of all, it's Far Cry. We didn't lose it. We sold actually the rights to Ubisoft.
Okay.
So they just can do whatever they want with it. And it was a bit of a hard move for us, but we wanted to focus that money to create something new. So that means with Crysis, for example, our new creation now, the fact that Crysis actually from the design on as a more than one version, effectively, is already, I think, no secret.
Console.
No, I didn't say console. I said there's more than one version. So what I mean is that the story is not finished yet completely with the first version of the game. In fact, it's designed to be a trilogy, but what happens in terms of whether the big question is, will we start working on Crysis 2 right away? And the answer to that is it really depends on how much request is for that. Not from publisher side, but from the fan side mainly. How does it do business-wise? And also, I think the most important potentially, how does the team feel about jumping right away into sequel? See it this way. Our studio is pretty young still. We just finished, we started 2001. We finished 2004 Far Cry. We could have done Far Cry 2. But in my mind, and my two brothers' mind, effectively, as this was 3 Yerli brothers, we said, hey, we just established a culture who drive for innovation and innovation and innovation, And after Far Cry, we said, because there was a lot of people who thought, hey, we could do Far Cry 2 like this, like nothing. We learned so much, we can do it extremely fast. And I was afraid of that mood in the company, because I thought that mood is counterproductive right now. If we look at it as a sequel development right away, then we may lose the edge we had, as a culture. We just developed a culture which we needed to manifest. And so we said
Could you have called Crysis Far Cry 2 though? I mean,
No.
in that stretch, in the sense
No,
that some,
completely not.
they're similar enough?
Because we said because Far Cry 2 would have done with CryEngine 1, it just would have continued. But for Crysis, we said, guys, we're gonna make a new IP. There was we had a company meeting. We said we have decided we make a new IP, new engine, new everything. You know, everybody was like, "What?" Like, we spent so much time on working the new engine, writing the engine, and finishing Far Cry. We should leverage on it.
Why that determination to do your own engine?
Well, this is for me. It's just a matter of controlling fate in the company. Like, I don't want to rely to anybody else at the core of our game for success of our title, because it inherently drives gameplay, and that should be in our hands.
Is there any kind of a regional thing there too? I mean, because something I also wanted to ask you about was about the German market and your fans there, and how I'm sure, like, you'll see that there's a sense of pride involved that, you know, that the game is coming from a studio that's based in Germany. And also, is it another way of kind of like saying, like, yeah, all you know, premier engines do not have to come from, you know, the same 2 or 3 locations?
Yeah, but that was not the motivation for it. We didn't. This was not even in the somewhere close to the mind in my mind. But to come back a bit again to the topic, because for me, Crysis was about the development of Crysis. For me, was about establishing a culture that strives for innovation and pushes the boundaries. And we had this culture developed, and I wanted to manifest it into our studio. After Crysis, now this team has been pushed 2 times effectively with working on new IPs and new technologies. Now we have a culture that exists as a company, and for me, forming the company is more important than making the games.
So in theory, now you think you could. So you could go on to a Crysis 2 and feel that you've now pushed yourselves enough.
Yes, without losing the edge, in terms of without losing the culture of Crytek. Because if you would have entered a sequel right away, it would have been, okay, we're not just new IP, but now we're also sequel. And I wanted to make a Crytek an IP creator as a primary goal. And even if we do the sequel now, we would make sure it has enough innovation that it's actually not just continuing the story, but actually has truly core gameplay innovations in itself and technical innovations as we used to. So it has to stay true to our culture and what consumers and our gamers, fans happen to learn by now. I mean, when they play now Crysis after Far Cry, there will be 2 times received games which push them, and in terms of quality, in terms of perception of gameplay, in terms of their mindsets, like they have to think before they shoot. It's not a stupid shooter, it's an intelligent shooter. And once they get used to that, they will expect this to follow. And so for me, that's now the opportunity where we can follow it effectively as a culture to serve to that purpose. And so that means the Crysis 2 is right now is much more likely than Far Cry 2 ever was.
Unlike id, say, though, where they, you know, retained Wolfenstein, Doom, and Quake, and then went back and forth on them. I mean, you sold Far Cry, so I was just wondering if you were thinking that maybe there wasn't enough distinct, that the scenarios and everything in that world that you created weren't distinct enough to merit maintaining and retaining. You know, I mean, you could go on and do all these other things, and it's not so crucial.
We needed the financial. We wanted to increase our independence and creative control. So we had to essentially create a financial background, and the only way was to sell the baby one and make a new baby.
Right.
So is it still hard to you to have lost that baby then?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, to see a new one too that's out now.
Visitation rights occasionally, you know?
Yeah, we got this.
But you knew at the time you sold it, you knew that they were going to make a Far Cry 2.
Of course, and
all the Xbox ones, the Instincts and
right. So how do you feel about those? I mean, do you or as much as you want to get into, or the thought of a Far Cry 2? I mean,
I think specifically Far Cry 2. I mean, have you looked at it? You were just at games convention, right?
Yeah, but I was there for 4 hours and I had to go back to the office right away. Okay. So I didn't see anything, unfortunately. I saw screenshots and I read the reviews on some magazines, and I found it very interesting. Actually, the funny thing is, it's very interesting because we had conceptual drafts for the Far Cry franchise, which were a bit similar, but the entire Africa scene and the scenario of Africa, I found is an interesting take on outer scenarios.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, so I dig it, and I'm happy that they don't follow the instinct powers, because I felt they were a bit edgy. I am sad that they dropped Jack Harper. Jack Harper was funny. I found it cool. Red shirt. It was cool. You know how long it took to pick the red shirt? It was really funny.
You should pick up the red shirt when you were also doing in Hawaii and wherever else doing reference shoots.
The point of the red shirt was really interesting. Just a little story
ABC
for that. We had at one point like a draft of Hawaiian shirts, and people said we should take green. It's camouflage. I said no. It should be the opposite. It should be actually literally like the contrast to the scenery, you know.
So is that where the whole frozen jungle thing was born?
Yeah, the
red shirt in the jungle, ice next.
Red shirt to frozen environment. No, red shirt wouldn't work. That would have to be the yellow nano suit, but it's not yellow.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not.
Banana suit.
Banana suit. Banana suit. No, let's not start there. Yeah.
Okay, so about the blonde explain.
Yeah, the blonde suit. No, the shirt was a fun story, but about emotions regarding Far Cry 2. I mean, I'm going to look at it always special. For me, whilst we will compete with it effectively, for me, it's still not like the other competitions in a sense. So it's different. I'm looking at it different. And I really hope they will pull it off great. Mm-hmm. Just for that matter. I wish I will play Far Cry 2 and I said, wow. Because one thing I said after finishing Far Cry and after finishing Crysis, I will say it again. One of the most difficult things is if you know that people want this game and the game is really in a certain quality bar. For you, it's extremely difficult to experience that game as any fun. And so one of the big dilemmas of a developer always is that you will never have fun with your own games, right? So, and Far Cry 2 would be a really interesting thing for me because I didn't have fun with Far Cry playing it afterwards. Actually, I had fun after 1 year later when I played it again. Because I forgot myself quite a few things about Far Cry. And so I played it again and I said, damn, this is really funny, you know. So in Far Cry 2, it will be very interesting to look at and to play.
Did you go on message boards to see, you know, what people were saying now that Ubisoft re-released it as a free game but with ads inside of it? Just to see, I mean, do you still care what people say about it? Or
no, I had no chance to see. It was just recently, right?
Just recently over here.
I mean, really, I have... Like from the outer world of Crytek, like what happens around Crytek at this last couple of weeks, I didn't.
Right.
I couldn't concentrate on because of the fact that we are every day we're working like crazy monkeys right now.
Would you be making Crysis, you know, the game that it is now, a PC only game, you know, with DX10 support, if not for the existence of the European, especially the German market? So that's to say, would you, if say your European market didn't even exist, would you still be making this game you're making now in the way that you're making it, and for the? You
know, that's the thing. We didn't really care about markets.
Yeah, we just the funding and.
Yeah, we said we had the back. Now let's do what we want to do, and that was it. There was no market research analysis whatsoever.
So why was the PC thing? Why that we need to make this PC game?
Well, there are two things. Anybody else was jumping to consoles. Like competitions, and we said, look, the market by no means will fall that fast that anybody can go and there will be no market left, you know. So developers leave, the products leave, the market does degrade for the offline games, but not as fast as the products leaving the market. So I saw very simple pragmatic decision. If we focus on XP and Longhorn back then, we still now, if we focus on that market, and really tighten our partnerships and focus on making the best PC game, we can have a substantially higher market on that if you want. Like if you want the reason why focusing on that was the consequence how we could win. But the game design itself, the platform was a market choice for us. And also just leading by our experience high-end graphics, so we can push it. It's an opportunity, partnerships, opportunities, competitor living opportunity, you know, not a sign that we should leave too, but rather not like a lead penguin that jumps and we jump also, but rather let them jump. We have more space for ourselves now. Mm-hmm. So that was the analogy. And then we said, what do we do? What kind of game? And then we said, this decision was not after finishing Far Cry. This decision was somewhere in the mid of 2003, before finishing Far Cry. And we said that in the future we will stay on PC. So we always worked on the consoles, testing things. I mean, we tested GameCube, we tested PS2. We had a polybump, our normal mapping technology, and running a PS2. We showed it to Sony. Nobody else has it in the world, even today. But we had the normal mapping technology running. We had it running on GameCube.
So is that the equivalent of like normal mapping on a PS2 then? Like true?
Yeah, truly normal mapping. We had the specular point lights, everything. Anti-aliasing, we had it running on PS2.
Well,
but
just a straight tech test?
Yeah, just to see if we were to own PS2, how we would push this platform. And we want to challenge ourselves. We did it. After 8 months, we had first results. It was really awesome. But we realized also we could never port Far Cry to PS2. It's impossible. But we would have to make a new IP. And we were almost actually doing it. But we said, last minute, we said, no, PC, guys, PC. And we constantly research PS3, 360, Nintendo Wii, us here and there. Nintendo Wii, not that much, but we always research those platforms. But the company culture is clearly PC driven and will stay like this even in the future. So I can bet on it.
We were talking before we hit record on this about how you can use a controller for multiplayer.
Yeah, you can.
And let's just hear about that. I mean, it's clearly a point of entry for some people that might be afraid to or just not used to using a mouse for. Just imagine
scenario. Just imagine scenario in, let's say, 1 year from now, you have this really this monitor which is 30-inch and plays 2500 by whatever resolution. Okay, I think 225 by 1600 something. And you boot up Crysis at that resolution with anti-aliasing going on, and the new graphic card that you just bought, whatever the NV Next, maybe 100 by then, the GT, maybe GeForce 9000, I don't know what will come up 1 year, but probably I'll get in trouble now as a media for that. But the point is that imagine this new graphic card comes out and you have your lead console title as a shooter friend who just played this console, best shooter on the console, and you tell him, here, take the 360 controller on Vista and play it. He will get an experience that no other platform can give you. Even today, he will achieve that. So that's, for me, one of the reasons why we were actually interested in moving on the controller. So to showcase experiences that are not possible on consoles.
I think that's a good strategy. I can't knock it just for the fact that I was first a console gamer. And as I graduated to being a PC gamer, it was with
you graduated.
It was with
the right term.
You're going to get in trouble for that.
It was with
he graduated to PhD degree as a gamer.
It was with the Dreamcast at first because it let me use a mouse and keyboard. But then for the longest time, when I got a PC, I actually played the original Half-Life with a controller in one hand for the analog and then a mouse in the other. So
that's really wow.
And with the. But it was like it took a while, and then I got off of that, and I weaned myself off of that, and I learned to use the keys, and then now, I'm not where I'm, so I can, if you can get someone in the door by saying, yeah, you have an interface that you're comfortable with,
yep,
and then
absolutely.
By the time that someone gets a PC that's able to run Crysis, I'm assuming they're in the perfect position to sort of acclimate themselves to using the other interface, over time. But you said you can use both in multiplayer, and that just seemed interesting to me because without serious balancing tweaks, or like if you have a controller peer server or something,
that's a setup. That's a setup.
Okay, so you can say, find me a server that supports nothing but controller.
Yeah. The server side, it can set up all kind of variables to make sure that it's like only for like a joypad.
Do you think that's pretty easy to like cheat or something? Because I've always wondered on console why they don't support. There are many reasons involved, but one of the chief reasons that we hear for why you can't plug into the existing ports on your 360 or something, a mouse and keyboard, is that we don't want to disturb the playing field like this. And say, well, why don't you make a pure based server thing? Is it easy to circumvent that, or do you think that's more of an excuse for other reasons?
In fact, in our case, the servers, if they're controller-based, they can still say controller and keyboard allowed, so it's completely flexible. Honestly, I think it's a matter of market. I think that they assume on consoles there will be very few people playing with keyboard and mouse, and on PC, the assumption is there will be very few people playing with controller. Mm-hmm. So that alone just makes the business value of that zero for many developers. For us, it's really To be honest, I would never recommend playing Crysis with Crysis Power Struggle with a controller. It's a PC title. It's a Power Struggle is fast, and I mean very fast, and it needs a proper and quick reactions. So it needs a proper UI, which is already established itself for shooter. But for the single play experience, for people who come from the console, they're super invited to play it. I think they will have fun with it. But I'm not a console gamer per se. Myself, I know that people actually play tested multiplayer, both instant action and power struggle with controller, and they had fun with their likes. If they play, they had fun. I'm sure the playfield will be disturbed if the interface is mixed, of course. That's natural, because somebody who plays, even with an inherent balancing system, like with auto-aiming support, whatnot, somebody who plays on a mouse and keyboard will always kill somebody who plays with a controller.
Yeah. Conceptually, when I play the Power Struggle beta...
one thing I would like to add is the controller has its benefits in like steering vehicles and other aspects. Like particularly when it comes to vehicles, there is some benefit in the controller. So.
Yeah, and as everyone that plays Battlefield knows, they're all really good for flying the helicopters, and in some cases, I mean,
So there's some things, some cases where it kind of if you're dedicated to that kind of playing style, or prefer this kind of playing style, you may choose a controller as a preference.
Or have them both plugged in, and when you get in aircraft, pick up the controller.
Yeah.
So one thing I was going to say is that, I've had limited experience with Power Struggle beta, but conceptually, I'm super impressed with it. you go in, you've got tactical nukes, you've got, I've used, the various ice weapons, the heavy prototype tank and stuff. All this is awesome. But the one impediment I was having is the kind you'd expect in a beta, and that's just performance stuff. And you say that, of course, you're optimizing it. But outside of, specific, I don't want to, have any kind of beta questions or give you my list of beta functions now. But since you're making a game that is so cutting edge, you've got this kind of reverse scale. When you have multiplayer, people start to prize performance more than anything.
I know.
You want it to look good, but you also, if you're going to play well, you get to the point where you're like, okay, maybe if that crab that comes up out of the water looks like a box, it's fine as long as I can hit this guy in the head that's been killing me for the last 30 minutes.
I don't believe this. I truly believe that a great gameplay and an upgrade in visuals will find its way into the future. So for me, the most important multiplayer mode we have is Power Struggle DX10. And I'm sure there will be only hundreds of players playing it at the beginning. not in the, I mean, hundreds a bit exaggerated, but I believe there will be a slow adaptation. I hope it will be big, of course. But we count on Power Struggle DX10 to actually penetrate into the multiplayer gaming scene over the course of the next year. So, but we want to introduce a DX10 multiplayer. This was, we just say it's a first mover. We will be punished for it because it's a high-end burden. But we wanted to take the step now, not in 1 year, not in 2 years, but now, to level out the playfield. I mean, if we were to launch a multiplayer-only game today, for example, look at the scenario, we cannot afford to cut off the min specs, saying this DX10 only. We can't do that. But we do it because we have, in Crysis, we have Power Struggle, which has DX9. We have Instant Action, and we have single player Crysis. Okay, there's enough substance already for that. So we said, let's give this feature element of the multiplayer gaming already into the package, and let's support it and wait, make sure the gameplay is refined. So DX9, but let's have it there. It will eventually be penetrating, or not penetrating. How do you say? It will be adopted by the different gamers as the months pass by. That's what I'm truly believing in. It is what I believe also the PS3 looks at the console market right now. I eventually believe PS3 will be still leading, but it takes its time because the adaptation rate is due to different reasons. So, but the adaptation rate is slowly, but it's getting there. And I think Power Struggle DX10 will be similar. Power Struggle DX9, which you're testing right now, has performance issues through beta reasons, but also through still optimizations in the rendering, but also in the gameplay code still.
You're pretty confident that those will be ironed out?
Well, we will, of course.
Okay.
We will do our best to make performance always a topic, but let's not forget, again, Crysis is a high-end title, and will live primarily from single player, but the gameplay of multiplayer for us was important from a concept point of view, that it works, that the network technology is really absolutely optimized.
Yeah.
But whether that the graphics are demanding is clear.
Right. As long as, I was running it on an 8800, it's a GTS, granted, but, excellent RAM, everything else is pretty good. What I certainly consider high-end, and a lot of other people are definitely going to consider high-end as well. So as long as on a system like that, it's optimized to the point. But then if you get to the point where you're splitting hairs about when you say a future system, and you don't mean, well, hey, someone can go to Circuit City, spend $3,000, and they still aren't getting satisfactory performance out of it, then that's when I think it could become a problem.
Yeah. I believe that the 8800 GTS will play the game somewhere between mid and high configuration.
Mm-hmm.
But very high, you will need something more for multiplayer. But then again, for very high, for DX10, to run a 32 match with this next generation of gameplay, you will need an SLI config or something like this. But principally, I don't want to... the one thing I want to mention is that whilst some people are going to pick up the frame rate as an issue on Power Struggle particularly because it's a really demanding system, the fact people should never forget the fact that we have a huge single player, we have a whole multiplayer game in the package too, which is usually a standalone package itself. And we're going to release also the editor itself, so we have from substance of...
I will vouch for that on a conceptual level and on the way that everything is coming together. Power Struggle alone is as much of a game as Battlefield or Quake Wars or something like that, which are...
So what I'm saying is that whilst performance it might be an issue, I think anybody who buys Crysis ultimately has to look at it as the fact that the substance is big. They get effectively 2 games and a whole development tool alongside with it for the price of 1 game. And for me, and plus the fact that we invested into the future, they get also the future taste of multiplayer, how it will be. Other games, you will see other multiplayer games will migrate to DX10 maybe in 2 years, not now. So the adaptation to DX10 gameplay, not through DX10 API gains, but the performance gains, what the DX10 generation will bring in the future, that gameplay is already included. And we will see other developers adapting to it, not within the next 2 years, just because the fact it's actually a pretty harsh cut. And we took it for the sake of the gaming future of PC.
This other question I think applies to what you're doing. Are you familiar with the game Call of Juarez? It came out of Poland.
Yes, I actually like the game.
In the multiplayer, there's an option to use the depth of field feature. If you have enough hardware, you're able to run it. Similarly, you have motion blur in Crysis. But the thing there, though, is that because you have an open system and people with, min specs aren't even able to run it with depth of field. But I found that in the gameplay, by playing the game with it on and off, you're better served with it being off from a pure advantage level of being able to see your environment and whatever. It might be more immersive or realistic to have it on in the same way as motion blur. Mm-hmm. But when it gets too heavy, it's almost like if you're playing to win, you're going to turn those things off. So I was wondering, if in a general thing, just in the future of multiplayer gaming, do you see that as being an impediment ultimately until you, at least on an open platform like PC, where you can't enforce the standard?
I think that if you look at it, if you look at the next-gen gameplay we're introducing with the DX10, we have day-night cycles, we have the physics gameplay, breakability, etc. We use DX10 effectively to gain on performance and what it gains on performance, and we essentially use the system capacities more. So because we assume somebody who runs 8800 also has a certain CPU capacity, right? So he can go to very high. If he can do that, we automatically use a system to compress data more on the network, so we can play on the network traffic more. So we can effectively populate the game more rich. And whether somebody can turn off the features, I would say if they don't change gameplay, for example, my nephew, who is playing multiplayer Power Struggle Beta, he has 8800 Ultra, but the way he plays it is at the low configuration. I said, why don't you turn on the features? He says, well, I'm playing to win, I want high frame rate. Same as when I played the first time Quake 3 Arena. What did I do? Take the textures almost off, actually, as much as we can, in order to get the high frame rate. So, but at the same time, I said, well, you know what, I'm more like a visual purist, so I want to see the graphics of that. So I enabled all the highest resolution and the highest configuration I could get, but the price is frame rate. So I think that in multiplayer, that the gameplay is more important.
Well,
it's granted.
It sounds like you need also another server that like limits people playing on a, like, you know, like if you want a server where people agree to all use motion blur and depth of field and stuff.
Well, motion blur depth of field is a topic which I think in the beta our motion blur was too much happening.
Right.
That was one of the reasons why people are. It's already addressed. In fact, they're bringing it up, and some community members brought it up already.
Yeah, it was very intense.
Yeah, but a principal thing is one of the reasons why DX10 actually has multiplayer impact in gameplay impact in multiplayer. Is because gameplay is more important in multiplayer. Gameplay benefits is more of a reason why to migrate to new generation of a platform, and gameplay is more important in anything in multiplayer than the visual feast. But I believe still, like there are people who are jumping from Counter-Strike to other games step by step, because at one point the visual just doesn't cut it anymore. Why did we see a Counter-Strike upgrade? Because the visuals doesn't cut it anymore too, compared to other games. And the customer who sees a game, high-end game, and then she sees a Counter-Strike, says, why does Counter-Strike 1, granted, look so bad? So there needed to be an upgrade. Even after the upgrade, what did we see? The migration doesn't happen that fast. Still people prefer the original, because it just runs fast and the gameplay is iron, right? So I think power struggle in the next 1 year to 3 years after that will become completely in the topic. It's high-end demanding, but gameplay will be refined as we go. And we will nail the gameplay to perfect balance, and the hardware will catch up eventually. And that's where we think that power struggle will win. It's conceptually. Conceptually, we tested it for the last 12 months, and we refined it actually quite drastically. And we think it has all the ingredients to be number one title, but it takes time to get there, essentially. So right out of the box, you would have to probably turn down the visuals if you want the kills. But if you want a average out experience with your friends, like where everybody plays in a high setting, you can have a great experience.
Cool. You guys have been chatting for a while. You guys have any questions?
Actually, you hit my questions I was going to ask, so...
How are we doing? How are we doing on time?
We've been yammering for an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I had one.
It's because I asked so many answers too long.
No, your answers are awesome.
That's great.
Do you? I'm wondering about if there is a difference in either gaming expectations or even play styles amongst that you've seen or experienced amongst European gamers versus American gamers, say. Like, are they not as a way to start any kind of culture war here. I'm just curious, like if German or French or English gamers or anyone over there, Eastern European PC gamers.
We're the connection, if anything, as PC players, I would say. We probably have, as hardcore, an American hardcore PC player, I would guess we have a good deal, at least as much in common with another hardcore German or Swedish or Finn PC player as we do between, like, say, Joe Console in America and Super Tech.
Well, this is what I'm asking. Like, are we all the same, or do you perceive differences? I mean, like in your experience with Far Cry, say, or maybe the kind of questions you're getting on the forums about Crysis, or is there just nothing that stands out to you?
Interesting. Well, the cultural differences, the only thing what we saw was that usually the American audience usually pays more attention to the visual itself. And the European audience usually tends to look at the gameplay as a primary reason.
Or more superficial.
Yeah, a little bit more. I mean, that's like Americans look Europe always like a more sophisticated by its culture. I mean, already. And the Europeans always look at the Americans, unfortunately, superficial and being too much, superficial, actually.
Well, we are.
And so I assume...
We actually, I'm not going to go there. I was going to talk about a specific video.
And I assume...
box opening.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about whatever this is.
Sorry, it's inside there. Nothing.
But principally...
It epitomizes superficiality, though.
Principally, I believe the gamers, so they don't, like particularly the elite gamer audience I was talking before, they don't differentiate. They want from everything. They want the blonde with a PhD, effectively.
What about
not just the blonde.
Because I've heard, from some European developers will say that there's a lot more forgiveness or that Americans expect a more streamlined and easier to use interface than some of the European audience is going to demand. And then they'll use something like Armed Assault as an example, which to people that are used to playing Ghost Recon in its recent incarnations, would just look at Armed Assault, also called Arma, and say, what the hell is going on here?
Mm-hmm. I think it's the UI, designing a UI that is easy to enter is a general rule of design anyway. So if somebody designs a product saying, our Europeans will get it, American market don't care, I think this is flawed by definition already.
Have you seen people make that decision?
No.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is you seem to imply that somehow Arma was done with this in mind or not, or they didn't care, or Ghost Recon took more challenge in UI design so that the game is accessible for the US market. There are probably some US market considerations here and there, but for example, during the development of Far Cry or during the development of Crysis, there were no considerations. There's one thing, actually one topic which came up, probably consequently all the time again, was the amount of gore. That was one thing which was like basically told, Americans like gore and Europeans don't, and so that was a constant topic. And even within our studio, with American voices and European voices, the call for gore usually came from the American camps versus
Jack LeMay. Is he still?
Yeah, unfortunately he's not with us anymore, but no, but American voices, other like Chris Evans or some other guys were asking for it. But bottom line is, I think it's also a myth. I think the general demand of gore or non-gore is actually defined by our state of happiness generally, like in the movies.
As cultures, you mean? Or?
Yeah, like as nations, in fact.
So we like gore more because we're unhappy?
We're just definitely unhappy.
I don't know what's happening here in America, but...
yeah, you're probably right.
But I think there's some... the topic, typically in the movie industry, the pick of theme of the movie or the amount, whether the drama is in trend, whether a comedy is in trend, usually is correlated to the economical state of the company, of the country. And usually the movies are designed, like in World War, you had comedies mainly as a huge contrast to what's going on in the world, right? So because people were depressed, so they needed hope. Or science fiction movies.
Well, actually, I just read an article about the movie industry in the U.S. right now that talked about the movies that are out now and the movies that are coming out for the rest of the year, that there's a great amount of very violent movies that are prestige movies. Some of the art movies, even like this Jodie Foster Brave One thing, and
it's crazy.
No Country for Old Men coming out. And the analysis was saying that like that the country psyche here in the U.S. is a little bit disturbed right now. Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying. It might be only that reason, really, because for me, for example, the amount of gore what I see nowadays, like I saw the trailer of the new Rambo. The amount of gore that movie trailer showed, wow! I was shocked.
Insane.
I was shocked by it. Really,
more shocked than how old Stallone looked. I thought that was the scariest part.
Yeah, that was. But okay, but the point is that I was shocked amount of gore, how much gore was there, and I think this must be related to the current state of America, because. But I can't explain what's happening. Obviously, it's not. We never took a deliberate design analysis on this. But bottom line is, that was the only theme or discussion topic I remember now, which came up. And
that's actually, you can't get out of it there, because you're making a game that's Americans versus Koreans, at least for part of it.
Yeah.
So you're clearly willing to comment on things.
Yeah.
So let's hear it.
So you want me to comment on the fact that you're shooting North Koreans?
Well, no, just what I mean. The fact you're making a game where that has a representation of America in some respect, however minor, even if it's
Yeah, I know, but you know what people are calling. The arm should tear off, the head should blow off when you shoot a rocket launcher on them. The body should disassemble. I said no, it's not. it's not tasty, and as a game, I think the representation of action has to be still done in a sophisticated way, but not over the top with amount of gore or blood.
Mm-hmm.
Gore and blood for me is always a cheap way to punctuate action. And when I say cheap way, I mean it's simple to shock an audience by amount of blur, but it's more difficult to shock and catch an audience by a good representation. Some representation which is not for the shocked by the gore, but by the action intensity.
Maybe it's because it's easier to blow up and jib a character than it is to have the ragdoll not look like
in
a
fact,
ragdoll.
to be honest, I said technically it's simple.
Human.
Technically, it's always simpler. To be honest,
To just have lots of gore or splatting blood.
yeah. I mean,
Have you played Team Fortress 2?
no.
Okay,
Not
because
yet.
that's
I want to play
super-
it, but I didn't have time. I have to finish Crysis.
As you know, it's super abstracted. very cartoon-like.
If I
and
would
it's
do
also super
abstract,
gory.
yeah. If I would do abstract, to
And
be honest, I would
it seems
go
to
also.
work remarkably well because of that
Yeah.
abstraction.
The good thing about Gore is
cartoonish.
the good thing is about Gore is that it simplifies, of course, the communication of a hit. You know, you hit something, boom.
Yeah.
It's a lot of blood, so it's very clear from any distance whatsoever. The hit reaction of sophisticated. I say sophisticated because it needs more sophisticated, like impulse physics and particles that are not too much but subtle enough that you can recognize it in shooting ranges, etc. So it takes much more work to make it still work.
It's a cheap sell too, though. I mean, we have to admit it. I mean, look at the history of games. When Mortal Kombat, remember that era when Mortal Kombat first came out, and there were games like Time Killers, and they were all about you chainsaw off someone's arm, and even though they look like complete crap by today's standards, at the time, you're like, oh man, did you see that? And while there are a number of reasons that it works, like in Gears of War, because it indicates, it's feedback. Yes, you are shooting this guy and it's doing something and it matters. And also, the shit talking factor of like, you see what I did to you. But at the same time, I think that is still there on some level. As long as you update the presentation, there's at least a North American audience that does get something else from it. Now, I'm not sure what the age group is or what, but it's like it brings back for me like that Mortal Kombat thing where it was a talking point. But at the time, I was like, what? I was in high school, junior high.
Had you a depression?
I would laugh at it then. It was cheesy because most of us like Street Fighter more anyway. It didn't really,
Yeah, but
a little bit of blood.
Again, I think the gore in games, I have difficulty already for the amount of gore, to be honest, we have in Crysis.
What about TNA?
TNA?
Tit and ass, as the Americans say. No,
Not enough in there.
You see,
How
we
about
don't have shorts for
let's
that.
say sexual content or innuendo. Not even innuendo, just
You see, this is
not that
one,
there's
one
any
thing
place
which
for
is
it in your
interesting.
game, but
This is
just in
interesting.
general in games.
This is one thing
Hot
interesting.
coffee,
Yeah, like sexual content in game versus gore in game. To be honest, I would rather have sexual content than gore in the game.
This is the Europeans.
This is exactly
Yeah.
This is European versus
exactly. I was going to say this is again where Europe differentiates America. When we have visitors from US to come to Europe to visit us effectively, when they go to the hotel rooms and they just watch TV like regular TV, they say, "Dude, you have porn in the TV." I said, "No, it's not porn. This is normal."
Yeah. My wife is French, and the first time I went over there, and I was watching television with her and her parents, my in-laws, and we're watching the 6 o'clock news, and there's a soap commercial, and on our soap commercials, it's all just innuendo and just like different camera angles, and there was just a nude lady using soap, and it was a commercial for soap,
she's taking a shower, and
I was just like, wow, this is the best commercial ever.
This is the best soap on
And all the French people in the room were just like, what is your problem? Have you not seen a naked person?
I bet you went out to buy the
Just your
soap right
daughter.
away, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And say, please.
But you hear that, it's true. You hear that all the time. What is the Americans hang up with? With nudity.
That's the thing. So, like, if we were to have sexual content, I think we would push that much more. Probably would get more trouble in US than the other way around. Yeah.
You would get your
Absolutely.
adults only rating if you had a naked breast
the
in
classic
there.
examples, in the Grand Theft Auto series where they had what was called the hot coffee thing that you can unlock in it. And I mean, you already had a game that consisted of. It didn't require you to shoot cops,
But you see
it
hot
involved
coffee-
shooting cops.
But you see
and
hot coffee-
and shooting people and everything else. Yeah, but then you get a blowjob, you get your wing dang doodle
But you know,
going, and bam, it's time to go to
criminal.
court.
Yeah, but you see the hot coffee mod thing for GTA was no discussion in Germany.
It was a
Nobody cared.
non-issue.
Yeah.
Well,
But
this proves you guys are more level-headed than us, I think.
I
I respect, definitely. I mean,
I really think sexual content is always, sexual content is not, it doesn't imply, I mean, the reason why I would prefer sexual content, and I'm saying if I would choose, and I want to be clear about this, I would rather choose sexual content versus gore, because for me it's less sick to showcase what happens anyway with normal lives versus blowing off people. That doesn't happen in reality.
But don't you think somebody could then say, okay, but you just devoted your time to making a game in which you're just shooting people. Somebody so you yourself have a limit of how much gore you can deal with, and we all do too. But there's going to be other people, older people or whatever, who are going to just look at any game where you're shooting someone and just say, that's sick.
No, it's because we don't glorify the shooting experience at that moment. And the way we do it is we just say it's an action of means. It's a means to survive. And it's a means to...
When the guy takes a piss on the dock and you shoot him in the back, you're glorifying it.
Well...
And that was definitely put in there to glorify.
But you don't maybe just to make you laugh. It's not glorifying it.
No, glorifying would be if he pisses and I piss around and the piss himself off.
As he spins around out of control.
At E3, when I saw that behavior, the first thing was like, you pull up your pistol, your customization, and you look if you have an electrical dart to shoot into the water. Yeah. I didn't have one. You got to hook me up, man.
Yeah, but again, this is where, as I said, this is where it becomes interesting in terms of design, where you say, okay, we do shoot people, but you should not. You are not rewarded for shooting the people. You actually. You have objectives what you have to do in the game, and the objectives say never kill everybody. The objectives is not about shooting people. It's about getting the whole experience of the Crysis, which is the finding going through the storyline. I don't want to tell anything about story anymore. I want you to play the game. But principally, if you go into the game and your survival act starts where you get detected, essentially the pisser detected you, then the core gameplay is about shooting. And even if you survive that aspect, then we don't want to glorify that. But the surviving effect itself is already enough of a reward.
Speaking of spoilers, I think this says a lot about the nature of games and selling games. But I already know, not just because I write about and I visit your studio, but I already know in the world of enthusiasts, that go to websites and read magazines, knows about the interior of the alien structure. They know about the icing and all this stuff. Now imagine, I always think back at the first time I saw Alien, right? And no one told me about it. I don't know how. It's because I was young and I didn't have the chance to hear everyone spoil the chest bursting scene and everything.
This was pre-internet too,
right?
Though.
And when you go into it at the time, you're like, I always wonder, would it have blew my mind in the same way if everyone had warned me about it? But I mean, is it in games, even the most carefully guarded, games where they're most carefully guarded, and traditionally they're the ones that have already proven themselves. Because they don't need to reveal they don't need to strip down naked to get everyone interested.
Yeah, Crysis had to go through this process of revelation here and there, simply because the hype asked for it, and development times were long, and so this was a kind of like a market demand, effectively. But at the same time, I would say Crysis 2, if it would have happened, you wouldn't see anything from Crysis for a long, long time. In fact, I wish, to be honest, that I could say to you today, look, I have a cool game to show. It's called Crysis. First time ever. I would bet your impression would be tenfold higher today than it is.
You're right. What if this game just came out and then all of a sudden it just hit, and then next thing I know, just out of the blue, in whatever a month from now, I'm playing Crysis.
Imagine you just get a DVD sent in as a review and say, here, please review.
And you put that in.
Yeah, exactly. Then that will be a complete different experience for you, and probably will be the way we will handle in future our developments. Because
your publishers aren't going to be happy with that.
They will be. No, they will be, because we will make sure that we talk about it in different ways, without revealing the visuals.
Without talking about the specifics.
Yeah, particularly one thing we will avoid for sure is, and
you like how we already got you to admit the sequel?
Yeah, that I hate it already.
We're still waiting for the console.
You see?
confirmation.
Yeah, I will confirm. Just get me drunk and I'll confirm it. No, but the way games are marketed, I wish the developers could release the games without relying on the marketing or the hype surrounding it. But it takes a lot of efforts and time to make people aware of anything today. Because of the internet, the market is convoluted with many, many hundreds of games. And to constantly remember and stand out and to be there, I would argue today there are games which are completely overlooked still. Completely. And if you look at Crysis, it has been constantly in the top most wanted, but we had to stay there, so we had to create that hype, and we can't show all the time same content. At the same time, it's sad because, of course, it has an impact on the first experience. So the people who never saw of Crysis and they get it first time, we had those people in the focus group tests. People we said, did you play shooters? He said, yes. Did you hear of Crysis? No. And we had them test Crysis, and they were a completely different experience than people who actually knew everything about Crysis and they play tested. That person who never played, he was literally said, he was shocked. He was completely shocked by the experience. Whereas the other gamer was like, "Damn, it just plays like I saw the. I can't believe I'm playing the great-looking game now myself." So it was linking.
In this industry, we write different stories every month to the point where we're now talking about the specific builds that we're playing along every step of the way.
As I said,
we're now like those. I mean, in the mass market, maybe those players are still there, but it's like it's weird because among the enthusiasts, it's like they have the blueprints to your house, and not only that, like if you're making a house for someone, they're there every step of the way, watching it, commenting every time. One of the guys with whatever.